Wiradjuri and Gamilaroi man Stan Grant occupies a unique place in Australian public life. For over 40 years, his award-winning journalism and broadcasting has made him a household name. But Stan has surprised everyone by turning his back on the glitzy world of media that made him famous to become a theologian. He's invited Compass to his property on Wiradjuri land in the Snowy Mountains to talk about his faith, his latest book, and why truth-telling is as important now as ever. Hello!
How are you?
I'm very well. So lovely to see you.
We have this thing in Wiradjuri country, Wiradjuri culture, that if you're here, you're us. So this is yours and you're welcome here.
Thank you. It's actually stunning.
It's gorgeous, isn't it?
And
gorgeous day. So what I've got to show you is my favourite part of the house, which is the library. Have a look through here.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, it's magical. Look at this. Stan, I need to say thank you so much for inviting me to your country. It is so extraordinary to be here. I can see why you love spending time here.
And it's lovely to have you here. It's your place too.
How do you feel when you're here?
I mean, the house that we live in is made out of the earth, and I feel the hug of the earth. I feel the trees, I feel the land, I feel ancestors, and mostly, you know, I think it's love, actually, in a deep sense, a love that encompasses all people. I just feel very held and loved in a place like this.
In your book, Muriang, you talk about this place being the place you retreated to after the failed voice referendum, and you describe this place as a sacred silent space. And you talk about, like a lot of First Nations people, that week after the referendum, it went quiet. Their worlds went quiet. And you mentioned that it was all we had left after Australia robbed us of our voice. How did you describe that heartbreak that you felt to people who voted no in the referendum?
It was very hard. It was very much an existential sadness. It didn't feel like a vote for constitutional change. It felt like a vote on us, inevitably. You know, this was, our souls were on the line here. I really began to question, in many ways, Indira, whether words were enough, how easy it was to say no, and how we didn't have the words to speak to people in our own country, to be able to draw them into the experience that we have had in this country with our history. It was very hard, and I think silence was the right response.
And a very powerful one.
Yeah, a very powerful one. And it also gave me, in my own silence, a space of contemplation. I saw the limits of words. And silence is not non-speech. Silence is another language. And it is a language of the higher order.
I know you've written about why you think Australians voted no, but why do you? Now that you've had a little bit more time to contemplate it?
Distance has been good, emotionally and physically. It has given me a chance to process it in different ways beyond the initial feeling of hurt. I think it was very much a failure of politics. I think it was a failure of being able to run the political campaign. I thought it was a failure of government that left so much of it up to Aboriginal people ourselves to bear that weight. In the fullness of time, I see it as a political failure, and I still want to go to a place that I believe that morally, spiritually, in a sacred way, we can reach other Australians.
How much do you think racism played in it?
Yeah, racism is in the water. It's always there. It's one of those things, racism, that it can obscure everything else. And there is no doubt, you look at Australia's history and I look at my family, I look at the legislation, the segregation, the exclusion, the suffering of my own people. There is a racism at the heart of that comes with the full weight of history. Academically, philosophically, I can sit here and talk about racism in abstract terms, but I know there are certain words that land with the full force, the full weight of history, and I know how those words can diminish us. I think about this example. I was filming outside the ABC one day, and just out the back of the ABC, and I was recording something, and I saw a person walking towards me, a young man and his girlfriend, and I had a sense, I just got a feeling. And as he got close to me, he yelled loudly at me, the N-word. And I just died inside. It landed with such a weight, such a force, that it obliterated everything about me. The things that I may have achieved in my life, the things that I can rationalise, it landed with this visceral power. And all day I walked around with that word ringing in my head, and I thought to myself, I've passed hundreds, thousands of people today, and no one said that. It takes one person. It's the drop of poison in the water that poisons all of the water. I could not get that out of my head. I was driving home that night and I just burst into tears. That's what it can do. And it's beyond rationality. It's beyond reason. It is visceral. It is historical. It's hateful.
I'm really sorry you were subjected to that because, I understand the effect that word can have on someone that it's thrown at. People listening to us chatting like this would say, how can Australia be so racist? There's a brown woman talking to a black fella. But as we know in Australia...
Here we are on television. Aren't you successful?
But also, as we know in Australian television, this engagement is very unusual. Still rare in 2025.
Yeah. How can a country be racist? I think it's a paradox too, that a country can be racist and loving at the same time. Australia is a remarkable country, and I grew up in an era when racism was really hard felt, emerging out of the era, post-segregation era, the era of the missions. I saw the impact on the bodies and the souls of my parents and my grandparents. But I also lived in this very strange country where someone could have a racist view of somebody and then see you broken down by the side of the road, stop and lend a hand.
That's true.
It's the Australian paradox.
We're all going through the ramifications from this last federal election, a result that no one saw coming, a huge majority for the Albanese government. But one thing they have said, that in this term, Anthony Albanese has said that he will not be returning and looking at the referendum again. So what would you like him to do in terms of reconciliation and truth-telling?
I think when it comes to reconciliation and truth-telling, I think we've hit the limits of politics. I think politics has always been incredibly constrained when it comes to that. I think they're projects that are beyond the reach of politics. Even our law is much further when it comes to the recognition of the place of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Australia than our politics is. You think about landmark cases in the High Court like Mabo, which established in law rights that went beyond the capacity of our politics to recognise. I think it's the same when it comes to truth-telling and reconciliation. But there is a realm beyond politics. And that's the realm that I seek to work in, is the realm of the magical world of stories and poetry and art and music that can really stir our souls and open us to each other.
Well, a lot of people will agree with you when it comes to a lack of confidence and belief in the political system. We're seeing right across the world at the moment huge conflicts in Ukraine, the Middle East, Sudan, that are turning now into humanitarian catastrophes without there seeming to be any sense of how they are going to be addressed. Now, they would normally be stories that you would be covering as a journalist, as a war correspondent. But you write in your book, Muriang, that journalism is a soulless craft. What made you become so disillusioned with journalism and a wonderful 40-year career?
I saw the limitations of it. I think during The Voice I saw how it can twist and distort our society. I saw the limits of words. I saw the limits of truth. I saw that the media was much more interested in creating conflict, in finding the point of conflict and exacerbating that. You got to remember, I felt this very personally. You know, at the heart of the referendum debate, I became the centre of a vicious campaign based around things that I had not said, things that other people had exaggerated around the King's coronation, the passing of the Queen, that were conflated with the Voice referendum with really hurtful consequences for me and my family. You know, racist abuse, media lies, death threats against us, to the point where I just did not want to participate in that anymore.
To those who have abused me and my family, I would just say, if your aim was to hurt me, well, you've succeeded.
I saw that in so many ways, our media has become the poison in the bloodstream.
So you went looking for other ways. You know, you talk in your book about delving deeper into words, into your books, into music, and of course you started looking at faith as well. And I was fascinated by the fact that you completed a PhD in theology. It's a pretty incredible flip, a lot of people would say, moving from a TV star world into it is a terrible world, but that is how you are seen in some quarters, into this realm of theology. Why the transition? And what have you found there?
You know, I can understand how people would see that and think that that is a transition. It was always at the heart of what I did, Indira. When I was a foreign correspondent, you know, which I did for 2 decades, reporting the wars of Iraq, Afghanistan, spending time in Pakistan, Northern Ireland during the Troubles, living in China, seeing the rise of China, North Korea, being at the pointy end of so much of this change, I tried to tell stories that looked beyond the event to connect you to something deeper. And I suppose for a long time, when I came off the road, I felt like journalism wasn't for me. And maybe I should have left a lot earlier. Maybe I'm the sort of person who has to be kicked out or dragged out. And I should have left a lot earlier. But I found myself gravitating to that other space. When it comes to theology, you know, while I studied philosophy, I always say philosophy gets you to the edge of the water, but theology puts you in the water. That's the deep end of the pool. And when I did decide to step away from the media, I'd already been studying my PhD while I was still in journalism. That became a place of deep contemplation, of solace and enchantment, where I could take the limits of the political world and flush them out through the depth of this tradition. And many things aligned there for me.
Well, you can always bring them together. Television and evangelism, maybe a televangelist.
Oh, God, no.
An Australian Jimmy Swaggart,
Oh, God,
maybe? No?
No. That's not my idea of God. You know, God's not a banker. No, I was drawn to the contemplative ideas of God. You know, the depth of a Catholic tradition, which is also my tradition. I saw the combination of my Wiradjuri culture. And, you know, as Wiradjuri people, we were raised in the church as well. We come out of the missions. I had several uncles who were pastors in the church. The church was very central to our upbringing, and it was an Aboriginal experience of the church. People often say to me, how can you be Aboriginal and Christian? I say, well, do you think God arrived on the First Fleet? Do you think we didn't know this?
But you can understand how some Indigenous people would associate Christianity with the faith of the white invaders.
I think that's a very political reading of it. And certainly there were people who came with the Bible in their hand who could not see the people of God when we were standing right in front of them. And that's on them, that failure. But remember this, the fastest growing demographic of Catholics in Australia are Aboriginal people. According to the census, while the rest of Australia is going backwards and increasingly losing faith, Aboriginal people, faith still remains incredibly strong.
Why do you think that
across a whole
is?
range of... Because we're spiritual people, because we are people of the sacred, because we understand that the human being is not the limit of the world. I think modernity establishes humans as the limit of the world. When I go to Mass, there is a fulfilment of my soul. There is a fulfilment of my identity as an Aboriginal person, and then an identity beyond that with others. And then also intellectually through the deep philosophical and theological tradition. It really took me into the deep water. And I don't have the answers, but I think it does get me to ask better questions.
The timeline of your life I find quite fascinating because you're of the age where all these significant things happened in Aboriginal rights. I found this amazing image of you as a
Oh my
young,
goodness, this is going to be embarrassing.
young reporter for the ABC in Canberra. What do you think? What do you think when you look at that photo of you
That's a bizarre suit, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's
What is
great
that?
fashion, isn't it?
Split ends or
I'm
something?
not sure.
That was a Mabo decision.
Yeah,
It's
Mabo decision.
1992. I look back at that now and I think these are the stories I was put here to tell. You know, I came into journalism. I was it. I was the only one. There were no Aboriginal people in the newsrooms, no Aboriginal people in the press gallery. And it wasn't easy. And in many ways, if I wanted to make it as a journalist, I had to put Aboriginal issues to one side. I wanted to be a journalist on my terms, on the terms that everyone else understood, to be better than everybody else. I got in earlier, I read more, I stayed later, I worked harder every single day, precisely for those moments when no one could say to me, oh, he's just the Aboriginal reporter. No. I could bring everything to those moments so that I was up to it. I was ready for it. For when those big moments happened, I could be there with credibility and experience to stand there and tell those stories. That's what I was here for.
There was another big moment that you were there for. Not covering it as a journalist, but you were asked to MC
Oh, I
this
know what
event.
you're talking about.
And
Yes.
this is incredible. This is Paul Keating's
there I am.
Redfern speech, and you were just a
I'm wearing
young
a better suit then.
Yeah, just standing off stage in a tent basically in that
in
park.
Redfern Park.
Did you understand the historic nature of what you were hearing?
I remember standing there on the stage with him that day, and as he went to give the speech, he turned to me and he gave me a wink. He's like, get ready for this one. People were sort of had half an ear on the speech and they're chatting amongst each other. And then the words started to land. We were the ones who did the dispossessing.
We took the traditional lands and smashed the traditional way of life. We brought the diseases and the alcohol. We committed the murders. We took the children from their mothers. We practiced discrimination and exclusion. It was our ignorance and our prejudice and our failure to imagine that these things could be done to us.
And there was a moment, there was a sense that we had crossed a Rubicon, that these were the words now being spoken by a Prime Minister in the public space. And those words are still debated, Australian history is still debated, but he put them in the public square with the imprimatur of the Prime Minister. And it was an extraordinary moment for me to be there and to hear that.
Clearly there's a lot of reckoning for you, not only about your own Indigenous spirituality, your Catholicism, your life as a journalist, but I thought one of the deepest reckonings was as a son and talking about your father and that changing relationship and looking back on that relationship and where it was and where it is now. How much has him getting ill and you getting older been about that change, precipitating that change?
It's a big relationship to come to terms with. You know, if I look at my mum and dad, what they had to endure just for us to survive. It was a struggle every day, Indira. You know, we were effectively homeless for the first 15 years of my life in that we had no home security. We were constantly moving. Dad was looking for work wherever he could find it. I changed schools 14 times before I was even into high school. We slept in caravans and with relatives and in sawmill shacks, but we never had a permanent home. You know, I'd see Dad come home from work at the mill. I'd see him slumped in a bath that my mother had to boil hot water for the bath. We didn't have hot running water. I'd look at him through the corner of the door and I'd see Mum. Mum would be just washing the back of his hair and, you know, the love that they had to get through that. And I'd see the absolute pain in his body. And I saw that it was hard, you know, Indira. You know, Dad's body, it's a history of Australia. You know, he endured some very tough things, some brutal things. You know, he wasn't the sort of dad who's going to put you on his knee and give you fatherly advice. I don't remember too many hugs or kisses. I remember him teaching me how to throw a punch. You know, he wanted to make me tough, and he used to say to me, you know, the world's going to knock you down, boy. It's going to knock you down.
I do a lot of work, Stan, in grief and healing and sort of palliative care work, a lot of research. And a number of the people I've spent time with have said to me that when they're in those places and getting ready for end of life and death, there are only very few words that they want to hear or share with their loved ones. Thank you. I love you. I forgive you. I hope you forgive me. What's left for you to say to your father?
I remember the first time I had to go and hold my father. He needs help to do so many things now, and to help him to get to the bathroom. And I felt his body shake. You know, he just shook, and his legs shook. And I got to tell you, and it's you know, it's not a good reflection on me, to be honest. But I struggled. You know, I just really struggled. I sort of felt repulsed in a way by the frailty and the vulnerability. It wasn't the dad I knew. And in some ways I was thinking, oh, I want Dad back. I want that hard man. I want that sawmiller, that tent boxer. I wanted that Dad. And yet there was something in Dad's vulnerability now. The way that he gives himself to us in his vulnerability. That is a depth that he could not show us before. And I've had to cross that bridge. To hold vulnerability is a really hard thing. And there was one morning, I was staying at Mum and Dad's, and I got up to leave at about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I went into the bedroom and Dad was lying in bed, and, you know, really early. He just had his white singlet on and his arms were there. And I reached over, and I've never done this, and I put my arms around him, and I felt how soft his body was, how soft it was. And I felt the stubble of his hair on the side of my face. I just leaned in and I just said, I love you, Dad. And I've never said that. And that was enough. It was said. And when the time comes, you know, inevitably when we have to say goodbye, I've done that. And I was able to say that.
It's so good that you got to that point.
Yeah. I probably wouldn't do it again either, in a way. That's not who we are. That's not who we are.
I want to ask you about something else you talk about in your book, that whatever hope there is for a different Australia, you write, it is likely I won't be here to see it. What sort of faith do you have in this generation being able to bring about that change you want?
What I would hope is that I would certainly hope for my grandchildren, should I have them, that they would not grow up in a world of the terrible disparity that Aboriginal people still suffer, the most imprisoned and impoverished people in the country. I would hope that we can do the small things, the simple things of equity and justice and fairness, so that a group of people do not suffer in such extraordinary and horrific ways. Beyond that, I wonder about Australia's capacity to be able to encompass the full range of Aboriginal ambition. I've seen so many people devote their lives to that with disappointment. The incredible warriors, the leaders who have shaped my life, who took to the stump during the referendum to leave disappointed, the people who have struggled for that change. It's not easy, we're tilling very, very hard soil. But we have an amazing generation, We
do.
We have people of incredible courage and intellect and resilience, way beyond me.
The last question I want to ask you, Stan, is I wanted to ask you about all the wonderful things, or the things that you most appreciate about the life you've had.
Well, my parents, my family, my culture, my faith, my music, my wife, my children. There are so many wonderful things. Australia, which is just a beautiful country. I believe in this project, whatever we want to call it, Australia. I believe in it. I just have this desire, I think, to sort of sit in the quiet and the stillness of what is sacred, and to find that. That's what calls me back all the time to the trees and the creek and hearing the birds. The things that get me closer to God.
Stan, thank you very much.
Yeah, what a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful chat. Thank you.